Welcome to Dark Creaky TV. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for the best Reddit creepypasta stories, perfect for bedtime chills. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to leave a comment. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the story. Growing up, my family was pretty normal. Dad worked a 9 to 5 as an accountant. Mum was a school teacher, and I was your average awkward teenager navigating high school. We lived in a modest house in a quiet neighbourhood where nothing exciting ever happened. At least, that's how it used to be before everything went to hell. It all started when Dad brought home an old Ouija board he found at a garage sale. He thought it would be a fun way to pass the time on a rainy Saturday evening. I remember rolling my eyes at the idea, but Dad had this infectious enthusiasm that made it hard to say no. Mum was less enthusiastic, but agreed to join in for a laugh. The board was ancient, with faded letters and a planchette that looked like it had seen better days. We gathered around the dining table, lit some candles for ambiance, and began. Dad was leading the session, jokingly asking if any spirits wanted to talk to us. At first, nothing happened. We all shared a nervous laugh, thinking it was just a silly game. Then, the planchette started to move. At first, we thought Dad was messing with us, but he swore up and down that he wasn't. The planchette spelled out, "Hello." We all froze. Mum wanted to stop right there, but Dad, being the curious guy he was, insisted we keep going. He asked the spirit its name, and it replied, Malik. That name sent chills down my spine. There was something sinister about it, something that felt wrong. We asked Malik a few more questions, and he answered in ways that were eerily specific. He knew things about our family that no one outside our house could have known. By the end of the session, we were all spooked, but Dad laughed it off, saying it was just a trick of the mind. We put the board away, thinking that was the end of it. That night I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing strange noises, whispers that seemed to come from the shadows of my room. I chalked it up to my overactive imagination and eventually fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, Dad was gone. At first, we thought he had gone to work early, but when he didn't come home that evening, we started to worry. Mum called his office, but they said he hadn't shown up. We called the police, but there were no leads. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and still, no sign of Dad. Mum was a wreck, barely holding it together. I tried to stay strong for her, but I was falling apart inside. The whispers at night got louder, more insistent. They sounded like Dad, calling out for help, begging us to find him. I tried to tell Mum, but she dismissed it as my mind playing tricks on me. Then, one night, everything changed. I woke up to find Mum standing in the living room, staring blankly at the Ouija board. She didn't seem to notice me at first, just stood there, mumbling under her breath. When I called out to her, she turned to me with empty eyes and said, "Who are you?" My heart dropped. "Mum, it's me, your daughter," I said, but she just shook her head, like she didn't understand. She walked past me and went back to bed, leaving me alone with the Ouija board. I was terrified, but something compelled me to sit down and place my hands on the planchette. "Dad, are you there?" I whispered. The planchette moved to yes. My hands trembled as I asked, "Where are you?" The planchette spelled out nowhere. I felt a cold dread wash over me. "What do you mean? How can we find you?" The board responded, "Can't find. Gone." Tears streamed down my face. "What do you mean gone? Who took you?" The planchette moved slowly, deliberately, spelling out Malik. My blood ran cold. The spirit we had contacted. It had taken my father. "Why did you take him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Trade," it spelled out. "Needed soul." I couldn't believe what I was reading. "What do you want from us?" "Obey," it replied. "Forget." I felt a sharp pain in my head and everything went black. When I came to, the Ouija board was gone, and so was the planchette. Mum acted like nothing had happened, like Dad had never existed. She went about her day as if everything was normal, as if she had no memory of the man she had loved for decades. Desperation and fear consumed me. I tried to bring up Dad in conversation, but Mum would just look at me blankly, as if I was speaking a foreign language. The more I insisted, the more she distanced herself from me, until one day she snapped and screamed at me to stop making up stories. I was alone in this nightmare, with no one to turn to. I started digging into the history of the Ouija board, trying to find any clue that could help me understand what was happening. I found old articles about people who had gone missing after using similar boards, but nothing concrete, nothing that could give me a solution. The whispers at night continued, growing more insistent, more desperate. They told me to obey, to forget, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. I needed to find my father, to bring him back and make my mother remember. But the more I searched, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The line between the living and the dead blurred, and I began to see shadows moving in the corners of my vision, hear footsteps that weren't there. I was being haunted, not just by the loss of my father, but by something far more sinister. And that's how it all began. The descent into a nightmare from which I feared I would never wake. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. The Ouija board had opened a door, and something had stepped through, something that wouldn't rest until it had claimed us all. After that night, I became obsessed with finding out what had happened to my father. Every waking moment was consumed with researching Ouija boards, spirits, and the name Malik. I spent hours in the library, digging through old books and archives, searching for any mention of this entity, but information was scarce and cryptic, filled with warnings about meddling with the unknown. Mum's condition worsened. She started to forget more than just Dad. She forgot small things at first, where she put her keys, what day it was, but then it escalated. One morning, she looked at me and asked, "Who are you?" It broke my heart. She was slipping away, and I felt powerless to stop it. One evening, while sorting through Dad's old things, I found his journal. It was hidden at the back of his closet, covered in dust. Flipping through the pages, I discovered he had been writing about the strange occurrences since we used the Ouija board. His entries detailed unsettling dreams, feelings of being watched, and the same whispers I had been hearing. One entry stood out. May 14th. The whispers are getting louder. They call my name. Last night I saw a figure at the foot of our bed. I think it was Malik. He said he was coming for me. I have to protect my family, but I don't know how. Dad knew something was coming for him, but he never told us. The realization filled me with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Why hadn't he warned us? That night I decided to confront whatever was haunting us. I found an old mirror in the attic, one that Dad had mentioned in his journal. He believed it was a portal of some sort, a way to communicate with the spirit world. I set it up in my room, lit some candles, and sat in front of it with the Ouija board. As soon as I placed my hands on the planchette, it moved aggressively, spelling out, "Welcome back." My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Malik, what do you want?" I asked. The response was immediate and chilling. "You! Where is my father?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Lost. Why are you doing this to us? Sacrifice." The word sent shivers down my spine. "What do you mean, sacrifice?" "Needed soul," it spelled out again. "Your turn." Suddenly the room grew cold, and the mirror began to fog up. A shadowy figure appeared behind the glass, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I couldn't move. Paralyzed by fear, the figure reached out, and the planchette moved one last time. Obey or lose. I yanked my hands away, breaking the connection. The mirror shattered, and the candles blew out, plunging the room into darkness. I heard footsteps, and Mum appeared at the door, her face blank and unseeing. "Mum, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. She just stared at me, then turned and walked away. I followed her, calling out, but she ignored me. She went to her room and locked the door. I pounded on it, pleading with her to let me in, but she didn't respond. I felt utterly alone and terrified. I called the police again, but they still had no leads. I reached out to relatives, friends, anyone who might help, but they all seemed distant, as if a fog had clouded their memories of my father and our family. The days that followed were a blur of fear and desperation. Mum's memory continued to deteriorate, and I started seeing Malik everywhere, in reflections, in my dreams, even in the shadows of my room. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, telling me to obey, to forget, but I couldn't, I wouldn't. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a voice, Dad's voice. It was faint but unmistakable. "Help me," he said. I bolted upright, my heart racing. The voice seemed to come from the basement. Grabbing a flashlight, I crept downstairs, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a gunshot in the silence. The basement was cold and damp, filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. The voice grew louder, guiding me to a corner where an old trunk sat. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside, I found a small, intricately carved box. As I touched it, a wave of nausea hit me, and the room seemed to spin. Opening the box, I found a bundle of letters, all addressed to Dad. They were from a man named Elias, someone Dad had apparently met during his college years. The letters spoke of occult practices, ancient rituals, and the dangers of summoning entities like Malik. One letter stood out. "John, I beg you, do not use the board again. Malik is not a spirit to be trifled with. He is a demon, and once summoned, he will not rest until he has claimed what he desires. If you value your family, you must destroy the board and sever all ties with him." It was dated 2 weeks before Dad disappeared. My hands trembled as I read it. Dad had known the risks, but had continued anyway. Perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of desperation. I realised then that I needed to destroy the board, but I also needed to find a way to bring Dad back and restore Mum's memory. Determined, I researched everything I could about banishing demons and breaking curses. I found an old book in a local occult shop that described a ritual to sever ties with a demon, but it required a personal item from the victim and a blood sacrifice. With a heavy heart, I took Dad's journal and a small knife from the kitchen. I set up the ritual in the basement, following the instructions meticulously. As I cut my palm and let the blood drip onto the journal, I chanted the incantation, praying it would work. The air grew thick and the shadows seemed to writhe and pulse. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath misting in the air. The whispers became a cacophony, drowning out my thoughts. Then, a deafening silence. The shadows coalesced into a figure. Malik. His eyes burned with a hatred so intense it felt like it could incinerate me. "You dare!" he hissed. "I want my father back," I demanded, my voice shaking but resolute. "And I want my mother's memory restored." Malik laughed, a sound that chilled me to the bone. "Too late." "No, it's not," I insisted. "I know there's a way to break the curse." "Only one way," he said, eyes gleaming with malevolence. "What is it?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Sacrifice." I swallowed hard, knowing what he meant. "Take me instead," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Let them go and take me." Malik's eyes flickered with interest. "Deal." Before I could react, he lunged at me. I felt a searing pain in my chest and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in my room. The Ouija board was gone, the mirror was whole, and the air felt lighter. I ran to Mum's room, and she looked at me with clear eyes, recognition dawning on her face. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked, concern etched in her features. "Dad," I said, choking back a sob. "We need to find Dad." She nodded, her memory seemingly restored. We called the police again, and this time they found a lead. A man matching Dad's description was seen wandering near an old cabin in the woods, looking lost and confused. We drove there as fast as we could. When we found him, he was disoriented but alive. He didn't remember much, just fragments of his time in a dark, cold place. But he was back, and that was all that mattered. As we hugged and cried, I felt a strange sense of peace. The nightmare was over, but I knew the price I had paid. Malik had accepted my sacrifice, and while my family was whole again, I felt a darkness growing inside me, a reminder of the deal I had made. I didn't know how much time I had left, but I was determined to make the most of it, to cherish every moment with my family, because I knew that one day Malik would come to collect, and I would be ready to face him, no matter the cost. In the days following Dad's return, our family struggled to adjust back to normalcy. Though his memory of the events was hazy, he had this haunted look in his eyes, like he was constantly battling shadows only he could see. Mum was more present, but something was off. She was overly cheerful, almost as if she was trying too hard to convince herself everything was fine. I, on the other hand, was barely holding it together. The darkness Malik left inside me was growing. Nightmares plagued my sleep. Visions of dark, twisted places where Malik reigned supreme. I started noticing changes in myself, mood swings, sudden bursts of anger, and an overwhelming sense of dread that followed me everywhere. One evening, while going through Dad's journal for any missed clues, I found a hidden compartment at the back. Inside was a small, leather-bound book filled with symbols and incantations, clearly ancient. It was a grimoire, a book of dark magic. One page was marked with a red ribbon. The title read, Ritual of Severance. The ritual promised to sever any demonic bond, but it came with a heavy price, one's own soul. The instructions were detailed and involved a complex series of steps, including creating a protective circle, chanting incantations, and using personal items linked to the demon. As I read, I felt a glimmer of hope, but the price was daunting. Determined to rid myself of Malik's influence, I decided to attempt the ritual. I gathered the necessary items, a piece of Dad's clothing, my own blood, and the Ouija board which I had secretly recovered from the basement. I waited until midnight, the witching hour, to begin. In the basement, I drew the protective circle using chalk, placed the items in the center, and lit black candles around the perimeter. As I began chanting the incantations, the air grew heavy, and a sense of foreboding settled over the room. Shadows danced on the walls, and the temperature dropped sharply. The ritual was intense. Halfway through, I felt a searing pain in my chest, as if Malik was trying to tear me apart from the inside. I gritted my teeth and continued, pouring every ounce of willpower into the chants. Suddenly, a force knocked me back, breaking the circle. The candles extinguished. Plunging the room into darkness, I lay there gasping for breath, feeling Malik's presence grow stronger. His laughter echoed around me, a sound that chilled my very soul. "Foolish child," he hissed. "You think you can escape?" I scrambled to my feet, clutching the grimoire. "I won't let you take me," I screamed into the void, but Malik was relentless. The shadows coalesced into his form, towering over me with eyes that burned with malice. "The price must be paid," he declared, reaching out with clawed hands. Desperate, I remembered the final part of the ritual, an incantation of banishment. With my last bit of strength, I recited it, forcing the words through the pain. The air crackled with energy, and a blinding light filled the room. Malik roared in fury, his form dissolving into the light. When the light faded, I collapsed, utterly spent. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the darkness within receding. But I knew it wasn't over. Malik was gone, but the price of the ritual had yet to be paid. The next morning, I woke up in my bed, feeling weak but alive. The grimoire was gone, as were the items from the ritual. It was as if it had never happened. I hoped it meant Malik was truly gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had merely delayed the inevitable. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normal. Dad went back to work, though he seemed more withdrawn. Mum's memory improved, and she stopped asking who I was. But the shadows of what had happened lingered, an unspoken weight that hung over our family. I kept a close watch on the mirror, the Ouija board, and anything else that might indicate Malik's return. But days turned into weeks, and there were no signs. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were free. Then, one night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint whisper, "Remember the price." My heart skipped a beat. I looked around, but there was no one there. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. I knew then that Malik's influence was still there, lurking, waiting. That night I dreamed of a dark place, a realm of shadows and fire where Malik ruled. He was there, watching, waiting. "The price must be paid," he repeated, his voice echoing in the darkness. I woke up in a cold sweat, the words ringing in my ears. The next morning, I found a small cut on my palm, as if something had marked me in my sleep. Panic surged through me. I realized that the ritual had not banished Malik, but had merely bought me time. The price, my soul, was still due, and Malik was patient. Determined to find a permanent solution, I delved deeper into the occult, seeking out experts and anyone who might help. I found a local paranormal investigator named Elise, who agreed to help me for a hefty fee. Desperate, I agreed. Elise was a no-nonsense woman with years of experience dealing with the supernatural. She listened to my story with a grim expression, then agreed to perform a cleansing ritual. She warned me it wouldn't be easy and that the risks were high. We prepared for the ritual, gathering rare herbs, sacred symbols, and ancient incantations. Elise created a protective circle in the basement, much like the one I had used, but more elaborate and powerful. She explained that the ritual would call forth Malik and attempt to trap him, forcing him to release his hold on me. As midnight approached, the air grew thick with tension. Elise began chanting, and I followed her lead, my voice trembling. The room darkened, and a cold wind swept through, extinguishing the candles. Malik's presence was palpable, a crushing weight that bore down on us. The shadows coalesced into his form once again. "You cannot escape!" he hissed, eyes blazing with fury. Elise continued the incantations, her voice steady and strong. The protective circle glowed with a bright light, forcing Malik back. He roared in anger, but the light grew stronger, enveloping him. "Finish it!" Elise shouted, and I joined her, our voices merging into a powerful chant. The light intensified, and Malik's form began to dissolve. With a final, furious scream, he vanished, the light exploding in a brilliant flash. The room fell silent, and I collapsed, feeling the weight lift from my soul. Elise helped me to my feet, a tired but triumphant smile on her face. "It's done," she said. "He's gone." Relief washed over me, and I hugged her, grateful beyond words. For the first time in months, I felt free. The darkness had lifted, and Malik was no more. Life returned to normal, truly this time. Dad's haunted look faded, and Mum's cheerfulness became genuine. I slept peacefully, free from nightmares and whispers. The shadows no longer held terror, and the mirrors reflected only my own face. But the memory of those dark days remained, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural. I vowed never to meddle with forces beyond my understanding again. As I write this, I hope my story serves as a warning. The occult is not to be taken lightly, and the price of dabbling in its depths can be more than one can bear. My family survived, but not without scars. Remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And always, always remember, the price must be paid. Life had finally returned to a fragile semblance of normalcy after the cleansing ritual. Dad seemed to have regained his old spark, diving back into his work with a newfound fervour. Mum's memory was back to normal, and her laughter once again filled the house. As for me, I was just trying to adjust to a life free from the darkness that had haunted us for so long. However, the calm was only temporary. It was about 3 months later, on a particularly cold and windy night, when I started feeling a sense of unease creeping back. It started with small things. A whisper of cold air brushing past me when the windows were closed, shadows flickering at the edge of my vision, and a gnawing sense of being watched. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just paranoia from the trauma we had endured. But then the dreams returned. They were different this time, more vivid and twisted. I found myself in that dark realm again, with Malik's eyes watching me, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "The price," he would whisper. "It must be paid." One night, I woke up in a cold sweat to find a symbol etched on my arm, a mark that hadn't been there when I went to bed. It was the same symbol from the grimoire, the mark of Malik. Panic surged through me, and I ran to the bathroom to wash it off, but it wouldn't fade. I knew then that the cleansing ritual hadn't fully severed Malik's connection. He was still there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what he believed was his. I needed help, but I couldn't bear to drag my family back into the nightmare. I decided to reach out to Elise again. When I called her, she sounded concerned but not surprised. "I feared this might happen," she said. "Malik is a powerful entity. Sometimes it takes more than one attempt to fully banish such a presence." We arranged to meet at her office, a small, cluttered room filled with books, herbs, and strange artifacts. Elise was calm and composed, but I could see the worry in her eyes as she examined the mark on my arm. "This is a binding mark," she explained. "It means Malik still has a hold on you. We'll need to perform a stronger ritual, something more powerful and dangerous." I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "I'm ready. We need to end this once and for all." Elise spent the next few days preparing for the ritual. She gathered rare herbs, ancient talismans, and enlisted the help of a few trusted colleagues who specialized in exorcisms. The night of the ritual, we gathered at an old, abandoned church outside of town. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of incense. We began by creating a larger, more intricate protective circle, inscribing it with runes and symbols designed to trap Malik. As the chanting started, I felt a familiar coldness seep into my bones. The candles flickered and shadows danced on the walls. Elise took my hand and started chanting an incantation I didn't recognize. The other participants joined in, their voices creating a harmonious yet eerie melody. The air grew colder, and a dark mist began to form in the center of the circle. From the mist, Malik's form emerged, more terrifying than ever. His eyes burned with hatred and fury. "You dare challenge me again?" he roared. Elise's voice remained steady. "You have no power here, Malik. Release your hold on this soul and return to the void." Malik laughed, a sound that chilled me to the core. "You think your pitiful ritual can contain me?" The chanting grew louder, the light from the candles intensifying. The protective circle glowed with a brilliant light, forcing Malik back. He snarled, thrashing against the invisible barrier. "The price must be paid!" he screamed, his voice echoing in the ancient walls. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light filled the room, and Malik's form began to dissolve. The air crackled with energy, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. When the light faded, Malik was gone, and the room fell silent. Elise helped me to my feet, her face pale but relieved. "It's done," she said. "Malik is banished." I wanted to believe her, but a nagging doubt lingered in my mind. The mark on my arm had faded, but it was still there, a faint reminder of the darkness that had invaded my life. The days that followed were tense. I jumped at every shadow, flinched at every whisper of wind, but slowly the fear began to fade. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we had succeeded. However, one night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it again. A faint whisper, almost imperceptible. "Remember the price." My eyes snapped open, and I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark, but I could feel a presence, a lingering shadow. I knew then that Malik was not truly gone. He was waiting, biding his time. The price had not been paid, and he would not rest until it was. Desperation clawed at my insides. What more could I do to rid myself of this demon? Determined to find a way to end this once and for all, I decided to dig deeper into the occult, seeking out more knowledge and understanding of how to deal with such a powerful entity. I visited libraries, consulted with scholars, and even traveled to meet with other experts in the field. One evening, while poring over ancient texts in a dimly lit library, I came across a passage that struck me. It spoke of a final, ultimate ritual, one that could permanently sever the bond between a demon and its victim. But it required something that chilled me to the bone, a willing sacrifice, Someone who would offer their soul willingly to take the place of the marked one. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The only way to truly rid myself of Malik was to find someone willing to take my place, to offer their soul in exchange for mine. The thought was unbearable. How could I ask someone to make such a sacrifice? It seemed impossible, and yet it was the only way. Haunted by this knowledge, I returned home, feeling more defeated than ever. The shadows seemed to close in around me, whispering, taunting. I knew Malik was watching, waiting for me to fail. One night, as I sat alone in my room, I heard a knock at the door. It was Elise. She looked troubled, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "I've been doing some research," she said, sitting down across from me. "I found a way to end this, but it's not something I can ask of you." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I already know," I whispered. "The willing sacrifice." Elise nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm willing to do it," she said softly. "I can't bear to see you suffer any longer. I've lived a long life, and I've made my peace with it." My heart ached at her words. "No, Elise, I can't let you do this. There has to be another way." She shook her head. "There isn't. This is the only way to truly sever the bond. Let me do this. For you. For your family." Tears streamed down my face as I hugged her. Grateful, yet heartbroken. The thought of losing her, someone who had become a beacon of hope in my darkest times, was unbearable. But I knew she was right. This was the only way. We prepared for the final ritual, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. The night was filled with a sense of foreboding, the air thick with tension. As we stood in the protective circle, Elise took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Whatever happens, know that this is my choice," she said, her voice steady. "You deserve to live a life free from this darkness." As the chanting began, the air grew cold, and the shadows deepened. Malik's form appeared once again, his eyes burning with malevolence. "You think you can escape?" he roared. Elise stepped forward, her voice strong. "I offer my soul in exchange for hers. Take me and release her." Malik's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Deal," he hissed. A blinding light filled the room, and I felt Elise's grip tighten before she collapsed to the ground. Malik's form dissolved, and the room fell silent. I knelt beside Elise, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered, my heart breaking. She smiled weakly. "Live your life free from fear," she said before her eyes closed. The mark on my arm faded completely, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Malik was truly gone, and the price had been paid. The days that followed were filled with grief and healing. I mourned the loss of Elise, but knew that her sacrifice had given me a second chance at life. I vowed to honor her memory by living fully, free from the shadows of the past. As time passed, the nightmares ceased and the whispers faded. The darkness that had once consumed my life was gone, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. I knew that Malik would never return, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Elise's sacrifice left a permanent mark on my heart. Her bravery and selflessness saved me from a fate I couldn't have escaped alone. I spent the following months trying to rebuild my life, treasuring the moments with my family and remembering Elise's final words. "Live your life free from fear." But healing wasn't linear. There were days when the weight of her sacrifice felt unbearable. Yet each time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered her smile and her determination, and it gave me strength. Dad seemed to recover as well, his haunted look fading as the days went by. Mum's memories stayed intact, and she never again questioned who I was. Life was finally settling into a peaceful routine when I received an unexpected visitor one evening. A woman, dressed in simple yet elegant clothes, knocked on our door. She introduced herself as Maria, Elise's sister. I had never known Elise had any family. "May I come in?" she asked, her eyes reflecting the same strength I had seen in Elise. I invited her in, and we sat in the living room, the air filled with an unspoken understanding. Maria looked around, taking in the warmth of our home. Elise spoke highly of you, she began. She told me everything before the ritual. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. She saved my life. Maria reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. Elise wanted you to have this. She said it would help you if the darkness ever tried to return. I unwrapped the package to find a beautifully bound journal, similar to the one my father had kept. Inside were notes, incantations, and instructions Elise had written down, along with personal messages for me. Tears filled my eyes as I read her words of encouragement and advice. She wanted you to know that her sacrifice was her choice, and she has no regrets, Maria said softly. I thanked Maria, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. She stayed for a while, sharing stories about Elise and their childhood. It was comforting to learn more about the woman who had saved me, and it brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. As Maria left, she gave me one last piece of advice. Remember, the light is always stronger than the darkness. Keep Elise's spirit alive by living without fear. Months turned into years, and life moved forward. I graduated from high school, went to college, and pursued a career in social work, inspired by Elise's selflessness. I wanted to help others the way she had helped me. My family continued to heal, and the shadows of our past faded. But every now and then, I would pull out Elise's journal, reading her notes and feeling her presence guiding me. The mark on my arm never returned, and Malik's whispers became a distant memory. One night, years after the final ritual, I had a dream. I was standing in a beautiful sunlit field, the air warm and fragrant with the scent of flowers. In the distance, I saw Elise, her figure bathed in a soft glow. She smiled at me, and I felt a sense of peace and gratitude wash over me. "Thank you," I whispered, knowing she could hear me. She nodded, her eyes filled with kindness. "Live well," she said, before fading into the light. I woke up with tears in my eyes, but also a sense of closure. Elise's spirit was at peace, and so was I. Her sacrifice had given me a second chance, and I intended to honor her memory every day of my life. As I write this final part of my story, I hope it serves as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of selfless love. The darkness that once threatened to consume my life was vanquished by the light of Elise's sacrifice. I will forever be grateful to her and strive to live a life worthy of her legacy. So if you ever find yourself in a battle with the shadows of the unknown, remember Elise's words. The light is always stronger than the darkness, and sometimes the most powerful weapon we have is the love and sacrifice of those who care for us. I've never been a superstitious person. Ghosts, spirits, curses, they were all just tales to me. But what happened after I burned that Ouija board? It changed everything. It all started on a cold, rainy night. My friends and I were bored, looking for something to do. One of them, Mike, pulled out an old, dusty Ouija board he found in his grandmother's attic. We laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. I mean, who still believes in this stuff, right? But curiosity got the best of us. We dimmed the lights, lit some candles, and started asking questions. At first, it was just silly fun. We asked the usual questions. Is anyone here? What's your name? But then, the planchette started moving more aggressively, spelling out words that made no sense. We asked if it wanted to harm us, and it spelled out YES. We all freaked out and decided to stop. I was the one who suggested burning it. "Let's just get rid of this thing," I said. We went out into the backyard, the rain now a light drizzle, and set the board on fire. As it burned, an eerie feeling washed over me. The flames danced strangely, almost as if they were alive, and the smoke that rose from it was darker than any smoke I'd ever seen. But we laughed it off again, blaming it on the booze. The next morning, I noticed something unusual. Right where we burned the Ouija board, a small sapling had sprouted. It was odd, but I didn't think much of it. Plants grow, right? But this one was different. It grew fast, unnaturally fast. Within a week, it was taller than me, and its leaves were a sickly shade of green, almost black. I started feeling uneasy around it. It wasn't just the tree's appearance. There was something more. At night, I would hear whispers coming from outside, soft at first, but growing louder each night. My dog, Rufus, refused to go near it, barking and growling whenever he was in the backyard. I chalked it up to paranoia and tried to ignore it. But then, things got worse. One night, I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was coming from the walls, like something trying to claw its way in. I got up and checked, but there was nothing there. This became a nightly occurrence. Then, the nightmares started. Horrific dreams of being trapped, unable to move, while dark figures surrounded me, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. I tried to confide in my friends, but they brushed it off as stress or an overactive imagination. But I knew it was more than that. The tree continued to grow, and with it, the disturbances. The air around my house felt heavy, oppressive, like a constant weight on my chest. I started seeing things, shadows moving in the corners of my eyes, fleeting but unmistakable. The final straw was Rufus. One morning, I found him lying lifeless near the tree. There were no marks on him, no signs of struggle. It was as if his life had just been drained from him. I was devastated. Rufus had been my companion for years, and now he was gone. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag and left, hoping distance would help. But the curse followed me. No matter where I went, the whispers, the shadows, they were always there. I did some research trying to understand what I had unleashed. I found stories, similar to mine, of people who had burned Ouija boards and suffered the consequences, but none mentioned a tree growing from the ashes. I was alone in this nightmare. One night, while staying at a friend's place, I had the worst nightmare yet. I was back in my yard, standing before the tree. It had grown massive, its branches stretching out like skeletal arms. The ground around it was blackened, dead. From its trunk, dark, twisted figures emerged, their eyes glowing red. They reached out to me, whispering my name, promising torment. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. My friend Sarah was shaken, having never seen me like this. I told her everything about the Ouija board, the tree, the curse. She didn't laugh. Instead, she listened and suggested we go back to the house to confront whatever it was. I was terrified, but I knew she was right. Running wouldn't help. I had to face it. We drove back the next day. The house looked the same, but the atmosphere was different. It was darker, colder. The tree had grown even more, its branches now almost touching the house. We approached it cautiously, and as we did, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I don't know what we expected to find, but what we saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. There, among the roots, was a mass of twisted, gnarled shapes, human shapes, faces contorted in pain, eyes wide with terror, all of them trapped within the tree. It was as if the souls of the damned were bound to it, feeding its growth with their agony. Sarah and I stood frozen, horrified. Then we heard a voice, clear and distinct. "You did this," it said. "You brought this upon us." I recognized the voice. It was Mike. I turned to Sarah, but she was gone, vanished into thin air. I was alone, facing the tree, the faces within it now screaming, their mouths open in silent wails. I ran. I don't remember how I made it out of there, but I did. I drove aimlessly, trying to escape the memories, the guilt. I realized then that burning the Ouija board had unleashed something evil, something that had cursed not just the land, but everyone who came into contact with it. I'm writing this now from a motel room, far from that place, but I know I can't escape it. The curse is with me, and it won't rest until it has consumed everything I hold dear. If you ever find a Ouija board, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't burn it. Bury it. Destroy it. Do whatever you can, but never, ever burn it. Because from its ashes, something far worse can grow. Leaving the house didn't free me from the curse. The malevolent presence followed me, a dark shadow that I couldn't shake. Every night, the nightmares returned with increasing intensity, each more horrifying than the last. I saw the faces of my friends, twisted in agony, trapped within that monstrous tree. I heard their voices, accusing me, blaming me for their torment. In desperation, I sought help. I visited psychics, priests, even skeptics who claimed they could cleanse negative energy. Nothing worked. The tree's influence seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. One psychic, a frail old woman named Agnes, was the first to truly listen. She looked at me with pity, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "You have angered something ancient," she said, her voice trembling. "This is no ordinary spirit. This is a curse that binds the souls of the damned. The tree is a conduit, a gateway for their suffering to manifest in our world." Her words chilled me to the bone. "How do I stop it?" I asked, desperation clear in my voice. Agnes shook her head. "You can't stop it, but you might be able to appease it, to lessen its hold on you. You must return to the place where it all began. Confront the tree and seek forgiveness." The thought of returning to that house filled me with dread, but I knew I had no choice. I couldn't live like this, constantly haunted, constantly afraid. I had to face the tree once more. I contacted Sarah. She was the only one who believed me, the only one who had seen the horrors firsthand. She hesitated at first, but agreed to help. We made our way back to the house, the journey marked by an ominous silence. The house stood as it always had, an innocent facade hiding the darkness within. As we approached the backyard, my heart pounded in my chest. The tree had grown even more, its twisted branches now covering a significant part of the yard. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, the whispers louder, more insistent. The faces within the tree stared at us, their eyes filled with a mix of rage and despair. Sarah and I stood before the tree, feeling the weight of its malevolence. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We need to perform a ritual, something to appease the spirits." I pulled out a book of ancient rites that Agnes had given me. It was filled with rituals and spells meant to commune with the dead. I found one that seemed fitting, a ritual of atonement, meant to seek forgiveness from vengeful spirits. We gathered the necessary items: candles, incense, a bowl of water, and a knife. As we lit the candles and incense, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. I began the incantation, my voice shaking. The tree seemed to react, its branches swaying as if caught in a storm. Sarah watched in silence, her eyes wide with fear. I continued the ritual, feeling a strange energy building around us. The faces within the tree contorted, their mouths opening in silent screams. I took the knife and made a small cut on my palm, letting the blood drip into the bowl of water. The mixture turned dark, almost black, and the whispers reached a fever pitch. Suddenly, the ground beneath us shook, and the tree's branches reached out, wrapping around us. I felt a cold, clammy grip on my skin, and Sarah screamed as the branches tightened. I continued the incantation, my voice rising above the chaos. "Forgive us," I shouted. "We seek your forgiveness." The tree seemed to pause, the branches loosening slightly. The faces within it stared at us, their eyes still filled with torment. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could end this nightmare. But then, a new voice joined the chorus of whispers, a deep, guttural voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You cannot escape," it said. "You are bound to us. Forever." The branches tightened again, and I felt the life being squeezed out of me. Sarah struggled, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what else to do. The ritual wasn't working. The tree's wrath was too strong. In a final act of desperation, I grabbed the bowl of blood and water and poured it at the base of the tree. The ground sizzled and hissed, and the tree recoiled as if in pain. The branches released us, and we fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The whispers subsided, replaced by a heavy silence. The faces within the tree seemed to fade, their expressions softening. For a moment, it felt like we had succeeded. But then, the deep voice returned, more menacing than ever. "This is only the beginning," it said. "You will never be free." We scrambled to our feet and ran, not looking back. As we left the yard, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The curse was far from over. The tree's wrath had been momentarily appeased, but it was still there, lurking, waiting. Back at Sarah's place, we tried to make sense of what had happened. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice shaking. I didn't have an answer. The tree's curse had a hold on us, and I didn't know how to break free. But one thing was clear. We couldn't face it alone. We needed help, someone who understood the dark forces we were dealing with. The ritual had given us a glimpse of hope, but the true battle was just beginning. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only scratched the surface of the tree's malevolence. The deep voice echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the curse that bound us. I knew we had to find a way to end it once and for all, before it consumed us completely. Sleep eluded me that night. The tree's malevolent presence lingered in my mind, its whispering voices a constant reminder of the curse that had been unleashed. Sarah and I knew we couldn't face this alone. We needed someone who truly understood the darkness we were dealing with. I reached out to Agnes again, explaining the ritual and its aftermath. Her voice on the other end of the line was grave. "This is far worse than I imagined," she said. "You need to come to me. I have something that might help, but it's risky." Desperate and with no other options, Sarah and I drove to Agnes' house. It was a small, unassuming cottage on the outskirts of town, filled with the scent of incense and ancient books. Agnes greeted us with a weary smile, her eyes reflecting years of dealing with the supernatural. She led us to a back room, where a large, ancient tome lay open on a table. "This book contains a ritual of banishment, one that can sever the ties between the living and the cursed object. But it's dangerous. The spirits won't let go easily." We didn't hesitate. The alternative was unthinkable. Agnes explained the steps: a series of incantations, a circle of protection, and a powerful offering to appease the spirits. She handed us a vial of dark, viscous liquid. "This is the essence of Nightshade. It's a potent offering, but it must be used correctly. Too much, and it could kill you. Too little, and it won't work." We returned to the house, our hearts heavy with fear and determination. The tree loomed ominously in the backyard, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, the whispers growing louder as we approached. We set up the circle of protection around the tree, using salt and candles. Agnes guided us through the steps, her voice steady and calm. As we chanted the incantations, the ground beneath us began to tremble. The tree's branches writhed, and the faces within it contorted in agony. I took the vial of Nightshade and with a shaking hand poured it at the base of the tree. The ground hissed and steamed, and the tree recoiled as if in pain. The whispers grew to a deafening roar, and the deep, guttural voice returned, filled with rage. "You cannot defeat us," it bellowed. "You will suffer for your defiance." We continued the ritual, our voices rising above the chaos. The candles flickered and dimmed, and the air grew colder. I felt a cold hand brush against my face, and the shadows around us seemed to come alive. I saw the faces of my friends, twisted in torment, their eyes pleading for release. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind blew through the yard, extinguishing the candles and scattering the salt. The tree's branches lashed out, knocking us to the ground. The voices of the damned echoed in my ears, a cacophony of pain and suffering. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. I crawled back to the tree, ignoring the pain and fear, and resumed the incantation. Sarah joined me, her voice strong and unwavering. Agnes stood outside the circle, her eyes closed in concentration, her hands raised in a gesture of power. The tree's branches wrapped around us, squeezing tighter, trying to crush our resolve. But we held on, chanting louder, pouring every ounce of our strength into the ritual. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook violently. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the tree's grip loosened. The The faces within it screamed one final time before fading into the bark. The branches fell limp and the whispers ceased. The oppressive energy lifted, replaced by an eerie silence. We stood up, panting and exhausted, staring at the now lifeless tree. The curse had been broken. The spirits had been banished. The house, the yard, everything felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Agnes approached us, her face pale but relieved. "It's done," she said softly. "You've freed them. But remember, the darkness is always out there waiting. Be careful what you invite into your life." We thanked her, feeling a mix of gratitude and lingering fear. The house was no longer cursed, but the memories of what had happened would haunt us forever. Sarah and I decided to leave the house behind, to start anew somewhere far from the horrors we had faced. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house one last time. The tree, now a dead, gnarled husk, stood as a grim reminder of the curse we had unleashed and defeated. I knew we had been lucky to survive and that we had to be more cautious in the future. But even as we left, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly the end. The darkness we had faced was ancient, powerful, and persistent. It had been driven away, but it could always return. And if it did, I knew we had to be ready. For now, though, we were free. Free to live our lives, to heal from the horrors we had endured. But the lesson was clear. Some things are better left untouched, and some doors should never be opened, because you never know what might come through, and what price you'll have to pay to close them.